Welcome.
Bienvenido.
Tusanyiso okulaba.
Magandang araw sa inyo.
Swagatam.
Bandeko babolingo. Bozali koyoka here on earth.
Here on earth.
환영합니다.
Here on earth.
Welcome to Here on Earth.
The beginning was undramatic. Rays of light fingered from below the curve of the earth and moved like soft piano music, touching in brief dances across the grasses. Stars above the half-circle paled and winked out. Then, with a crash of light, the crimson spread to fill the arc of gray, and the grasses below it glowed beneath a dark sky. Halfway out, the sun no longer arced. It soared across the curve of the earth, then rose in its entirety. The passenger beside the window stirred and pulled down the shade, but I was glad to sit and catch my breath for a while. I had wanted Africa all my life. I had been wrong about everything in the human world, but I had been right about the savannah. This was my home.
Joanna Greenfield dreamed of going to Africa all her life. The chance came while she was still in college, when she accepted a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study one of the last-known populations of chimpanzees at a research site in the impenetrable forest of Uganda. Her account of her adventures in the wilds of Africa might read like one more jungle tale, were it not for one thing. Joanna was born with poor vision and discovered early on that she could see clearly only in the presence of animals. Welcome to Here on Earth, Radio Without Borders, from Wisconsin Public Radio. I'm Jean Faraka. This hour, Seeing in the Wild. Have you ever had an encounter in the wild? Has working with animals brought your life into focus? Where do you find your deepest connection with nature? Do you think of yourself as an animal? And if so, how do you nurture your animal life? To join the conversation, call 1-877-GLOBE-07, 1-877-456-2307. You can send an email to hereonearth@wpr.org or leave a comment on Facebook or Twitter under Here on Earth Show. Joanna Greenfield is the author of The Lion's Eye, Seeing in the Wild, and she joins us from Westport, New York. No, Connecticut. Joanna,
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, your language is so lush and so mesmerizing. I'm not quite sure where to start. Perhaps I should start with the very first chapter in the book, The Highland Savannah, where you write, "Before I was born, my eyes lost their attachment to each other, the instinctive knowledge of how to swivel together, how to analyze data in tandem. The vision of the right eye was only slightly cloudy, but it withdrew from cooperation with the other. My eyes didn't work like two halves of a whole, and I had no perception of depth, no human faces. So human faces, with their blend of emotion and social mask, were unreadable to me as a child. Only animals, with their epic passions, could pull my warring eyes together for seconds at a time. But animals ran from me." Wow! Yes. What a way to begin!
Thank you. It was a fairly random beginning. It could have been any one of those 15 pieces.
But you're different. And you're different because of this vision, which you variously describe as a lazy eye. And later on discovered that more technically, you were without depth perception. But you didn't know that for a long time.
I didn't. It was a salesman in a glasses store, and he just very casually mentioned it to me. And it made sense once he said it.
And how did he know it?
I don't know. I suppose people had been coming in with prescriptions for prisms for their glasses, and somehow he saw that I was having the same problem picking things up, maybe, because I couldn't judge distance as well. I didn't ask him. But it's actually also called phoria, from the Greek word to be carried away.
Oh, perfect.
Which is the root of the word euphoria.
And, of course, you have been carried away by
Yes.
animals. In a way, you're kind of a feral child.
Yes. I do feel, in many ways, I didn't really think about this until you mentioned it, like an animal.
And it's hard. Explain to us, if you would, how this disability could bring you so close to animal life.
I don't know how much of it was just bred in me, because I think I am one of those people who is just obsessed with animals and nature. But I'm sure that at some level the difficulty I had in seeing sharpened my other senses. And it certainly sharpened my sight, because if I wanted to see something, I had to work so hard that by the time I finally did see something, I saw it almost as a golden snapshot. And it would become a very strong memory. And I searched out those things because of that.
And so how did this vision crystallize when you finally got to the African savannah? And what is it about the savannah that called you? It is a kind of, beginning place for our species.
Yes. Yes, and I think that was partly it, that just from looking at pictures when I was 3 years old, somehow I could tell that I could see there. And I could. I think it is partly that our eyes are evolved to horizons and an intense golden light like that. But I was the last student at the wildlife biology semester to see the animals every time.
There's so much paradox in the story you're telling us.
I did feel it was very frustrating to be in Africa and not be able to see the animals. But in the passage about looking at the giraffes in the beginning, one day I just wanted to see so badly that I finally managed to get my eyes to snap together and look at the same thing at the same time through the binoculars.
Have you ever thought about how that roving eye of yours is connected to the way some certain animals see?
Not until we talked before, actually. But it makes a tremendous amount of sense, because so few animals do have depth perception. And it's the predators who do, I believe, and the prey animals that usually don't. And I did feel like an animal of prey, because I constantly hurt myself on things.
And there's a section in the book where it's not the giraffe that you're looking at, but the giraffe that's looking at you.
Oh, with the acacia, yes.
And you say that you can't look directly at an animal without threatening it. So there's always this sense of slant.
Yes, and speaking of paradox, because I had to look so hard at something to see it, and because I was so passionately interested in animals and their epic emotions and the beauty of the way they express those emotions, of course, as soon as I saw an animal, I would stare at it very intently. And that's the most frightening thing you can do to an animal, because it's usually a predator staring before it pounces that looks at an animal that way. And almost universally, the animals I was trying to watch would either run away from me or bite me. And they would actually run to people who didn't even like animals for protection from me.
So how did you learn not to do that?
I didn't. Especially with the chimpanzees, I was so, obviously they were sort of godlike to me. When I did see them, I would stare so hard that they would get diarrhea and run away. And I had to physically put my arm over my eyes. And what I did in the end was what Diane Fossey had done to habituate the gorillas. She would eat vines. She would actually eat them. Because the chimpanzees would be able to tell the difference. And so I would sit in my little Mutwa pygmy blind and eat whatever was around me and hope it wasn't poisonous.
So that you went that far in order to make yourself one with them.
Yes.
And so let's backtrack